last ornament, I'm going to use the word casino. I'm going to just start with the letter C here, right? Let's go ahead and rotate it. Pick the font that I think looks casino-like. Let's move our spot that we're rotating from. And I want to spell out casino. So it's got 6 letters in it. So I'm going to go 360 divided by 6. And let's do a copy and then duplicate that around, right? So now we can go and take our type tool and spell casino. Just want to do something different with this one than I had done with the last one. Right? And maybe what we'll do here, let's actually take this letter. I'm going to Option and Shift drag it down. That again is a way of making a clone. Whoops, hang on. Zoomed right out of my artboard here. And let's kind of move it over to the side here. And I'm going to do another thing. Instead of rotating though this time, what I'm going to go is do a reflect on this. So I'm going to take this, it's selected still, do the same thing, show where I want to reflect it from, and how I want to reflect it, vertically or horizontally, and again, whether I want to do it to a copy or not. So now I've got this going on here. Let's take those two things and make them larger, right? And perhaps we can take those both and rotate them now. Let's try that. And D. Now that's creating some really interesting shapes in there. Let's go ahead. Again, we kind of want to select those things and group them. So let's see if we can go in there and select those. Do what? I'm going to go back for a second and take these things, selecting them, and I'm going to go ahead and convert them to paths by creating outline and group them. And I'm going to go ahead and lock them right now too. That way when I do things with this, it won't get in the way of that. Again, we'll do our rotation. Command D. Now we're getting kind of an interesting shape there. Because these are locked, I can go ahead and select that and do a create outlines. Let's go under type and do that. And let's go ahead and unite them. That way that shape will stay as one piece there. Let's make sure we go back and unlock our other ones and perhaps give them some color. And we'll take this one and change its color as well. Okay. These are simple ornaments, but they'll do for the time being for what our purposes are. Other things I can certainly add more of the text. I could use things like Casino or Monte Carlo to add as parts of my gift wrap paper. And the Riviera, let's do that one as well. It's good when you're making your ornaments to think about different scales. So you have some things that are larger, some things that are smaller. For instance, maybe we want to make, this is a fairly simple one, so I'm going to make it smaller. Gonna leave that one large, then maybe make this one a little bit bigger. We'll start thinking about where we would place these things in our eventual pattern, right? Let's take this one and type out Monte Carlo. And again, maybe go a little smaller with that. Bigger than Riviera, but smaller than Casino. I've grouped these things so they're going to kind of stay on their own. Okay, this is the basic thing that I want to work with for creating my pattern. So what I'm going to do now, let's go ahead and make it a little bit smaller. I'm selecting everything. I'm going to hold down the Option key and Shift, because if I made it really big, my pattern would only contain a couple of these things on the space. So I'll make it a little bit smaller overall. And while it's still selected, I can go ahead and put these away. While it's still selected, I'm going to go into Object, Pattern, Make. Now what it's done, it's going to tell me that it's automatically added this new pattern to my swatches palette. And there's my swatch palette right there. And you can see that pattern showing up. So I just say, okay. Then what we do, and I'm going to put the swatches palette away for right now. We can give the pattern a name. Let's call it Monte Carlo. And we can change some of the parameters of this pattern. We can go, right now it's sitting as a grid, but we can do other kinds of orientations, brick by row. You get a little kind of idea of that by looking at the icon, brick by column. I kind of like the hex by column. It starts to have these things interacting. Let's try hex by row and see how that looks. Okay, I think out of those, I might go back to hex by column. Other things that you can do here, if you look at this, it gives you the option to change the width of the space between these things. Right now, that's going to happen consistently with the width and the height. So if I select this and say it's going to be 2, it will reduce the next one by a similar margin there. And you can see how these things start to kind of overlap in that way. Let's see what it looks like if we do something like a 4 on this. They're really spread out, right? But let's go back to about 2.5 on this to see how that looks. I think that looks pretty good. It's showing me these others and they're kind of faded out, but they're not there yet. It's just showing me what it would look like. You can kind of see that there's some overlapping, and I don't really have a problem with that. I think that, if I'm thinking of the text as pattern, it's not really a problem. We can fix some of the overlapping, whether it's going to overlap left and top being in front, or we can make it to be bottom and top, or right and top, or top, right and bottom. You have all these different selections, and this just gives you how you can see how it's ordered out like that. Once you get it the way that you want, let's go ahead and say done. You don't have to save a copy. We've already got a copy of this on our swatch palette. So we just say done. And nothing's really happened there, but let's get rid of these. I'm going to select them, delete. I'm going to go and get my swatches palette, and there's that swatch right there. Now what I'll do is I'm going to create a rectangle. I'm going to go to the bleed edge here, click. The bleed edge is 11 inches plus the bleed edge is another quarter of an inch, 11.25 again. Say OK. Let's make sure that that thing is centered at 5.5 and 5.5, right? and it just filled with whatever color I had as my last used fill. But let's go ahead and fill it with this Monte Carlo pattern. And there it is. Now you may want to add some color to the background. I think you should because white seems to be a little blah, depending on what colors you're using in the foreground. But you could do that in the actual pattern swatch itself. I find it oftentimes easier just do that in layers. So I'm going to create a new layer here under my pattern. So I'll create a layer, drag it under the pattern, and I'll just call this background. And I'm going to lock the pattern. I'll create another, let me zoom back just a little bit. I'm going to create another color. Same thing. Let's make sure that it's centered. And then let's give it a color. So suppose we want to do this, or black won't really work because I've got black type out there, but you can see how you can go with some different color options and things like that for the background color that goes behind the pattern that you've created. Then you just need to make sure that you've got that. Oh, look, my thing got knocked off my center. Make sure I got that centered. There we go. And let's go to our layers. We'll lock that one. And let's make sure our pattern will be on the layer. Let's make sure the pattern one is where it's supposed to be as well. Somehow everything got messed up, but we can fix it easily enough. Now I've got my pattern there. This is what it would look like. I'll do a save and save it to my thumb drive. And we'll print these in class.